Buying a home, America's most trusted wealth move, has underperformed a boring index fund for 20 years. And in 2026, the gap is getting wider. Here's the thing nobody at the open house will tell you. Picture two people side by side. One signs a 30-year mortgage and finally feels like an adult. The other keeps renting, sets up an automatic transfer, and feels like a loser every Thanksgiving dinner. Fast forward 2 decades. The renter ends up richer, not by a little, by a whole lot. The bank, the realtor, and your Uncle Dave all desperately hope you never run that math yourself. The rule you grew up believing is broken. Let me explain where that rule even came from. Most people don't realize it isn't ancient wisdom passed down. It's marketing, carefully designed, plain and simple. After World War II, America needed jobs, needed suburbs, needed a middle class invested in the system. So Washington wrote a tax code that rewarded mortgages. Builders carved up farmland into endless suburban cul-de-sacs. And then banks rolled out the 30-year fixed mortgage, a product that barely existed before 1934. And somewhere in there, a powerful slogan was born. Rent is throwing money away. Owning builds wealth. Your grandparents heard it everywhere. Your parents repeated it. And you inherited it like a sacred family recipe. And for a long stretch, that recipe really did work. Houses were dirt cheap relative to incomes. Interest rates fell for 40 years straight. Property taxes stayed modest. Maintenance was a casual weekend hobby. Buy a house back in 1975, hold it, and by 2005, you looked brilliant. But here's the thing about cultural scripts. They keep playing long after the stage has fully changed. The set in 2026 does not look like 1975 anymore, not even remotely close. Then I ran the actual numbers myself, and honestly, what I found out was absolutely jaw-dropping wild. Start with the price-to-rent ratio. It tells you how expensive buying a home is compared to renting that same house. Historically, the average sits around 15. Today, in most major American metros, it's hovering between 22 and 30. That is a historic extreme. The sticker price of buying is wildly out of line with the housing service you actually receive. Now layer the 30-year mortgage on top. Borrow $400,000 and you pay back roughly $900,000. More than half of that is pure interest, pure rent paid to a bank for the right to borrow. Then add the quiet costs. Maintenance runs 1 to 4% of the home's value every single year, automatically. On a $600,000 house, that's up to $24,000 in repairs and quiet bleeding. Nobody puts that on a Zillow listing. And property taxes creep upward like ivy, year after silent year. Insurance premiums in flood, fire, and hurricane zones have doubled in 5 years. The trend is not slowing down. None of this shows up in the cheerful mortgage calculator your lender so helpfully hands you at closing. The truth is, the all-in cost of owning today is renting plus a permanent loyalty tax to the bank. Reason 1 is where it really stings. Most people don't realize how deep this rabbit hole actually goes. Reason 1. Flexibility. We live in the most mobile labor market in human history. Remote work is normal. Hybrid is normal too. The best raise most people get isn't from sitting still and waiting on their boss. It comes from switching jobs. The average job switcher recently out-earned the average stayer by 10 to 20%. Now ask yourself a simple question. How easy is chasing that raise when you actually own a house? Selling an American home costs 8 to 10% of value once you stack commissions and closing costs. Add title fees, transfer taxes, repairs to make it sellable, and the moving truck. The numbers add up fast. On a $500,000 home, that's roughly $40,000 to $50,000 vaporized at the door. That's 2 to 3 years of equity gains gone. Renters don't have that anchor. They keep their flexibility. A renter sees a better job in Austin, Denver, or Raleigh and simply signs a new lease. An owner sees the same job, runs the numbers, and decides to stay. They tell themselves it's about community. Sometimes it is. Often it's just the cost of moving wearing a noble disguise. Here's the thing most miss. Owning quietly traps people in a city, a salary band, or a life chapter they have already outgrown. That's the hidden cost of looking wealthy versus actually being wealthy. Real wealth is optionality, not a granite countertop. Real wealth is the ability to say yes to the unexpected offer. Reason 2 destroys the home equity myth entirely. Reason 2. Phantom equity. This is the one that should be taught in every high school and somehow isn't. When you sign a 30-year mortgage, your payment splits between interest and principal. You'd assume it splits evenly. It does not. It is front-loaded with interest by design, weighted heavily toward the bank from day one. In year one of a typical loan, 80% of your payment is interest, going straight to the bank. Only 20% is actually building your ownership stake. In year 5, you're still drowning in interest. By year 10, after paying for a full decade, you might own around 15 to 20% on paper. That's it. 10 years, 15%. The rest you rented from the bank under a different name. Now compare that to what your down payment could have done sitting inside a simple broad index fund. The average down payment in America is north of $50,000. Many buyers put down $100,000. Drop $100,000 into a broad market index fund, compounding at the long-run average of 7%. In 10 years, you have roughly $196,000. In 20 years, nearly $400,000. Liquid, tradable. Diversified across hundreds of companies instead of locked inside one house on one single street. Meanwhile, your homeowner friend has phantom equity trapped inside a single asset in a single fragile neighborhood. Value depends on the local school board and a roof that might need replacing next spring. That's not wealth. Here's the thing. People feel rich because the Zillow number went up. But that number is paper. To touch it, you have to sell, pay commissions, find a new place, and buy again at inflated prices. The market giveth, and the market chargeth a transaction fee. The S&P has roughly tripled in 20 years. Meanwhile, the median American home, after maintenance, taxes, insurance, and interest, has barely kept pace with inflation. The average investor in a simple index fund has quietly beaten the average homeowner. Quietly, without a single open house. Reason 3. The hidden costs that eat you alive. Let's break it down. Most people don't realize this. A roof lasts 25 years. Replacement runs 10 to 30,000. HVAC lasts 15 years, 8 to 15,000 more. Water heater every 12 years, 2,000. Plumbing emergency in a finished basement, pick a number and add a zero. Tree falls on the garage in a storm, hope your insurance still covers it. Foundation crack, brutal. Insurance is its own horror story. In climate-exposed states, premiums have doubled or tripled in just 5 years. Some insurers have simply abandoned entire markets: Florida, California, Louisiana, Texas. If you own there, you self-insure the risk. Then there's the HOA, that friendly neighborhood committee deciding what color your door can be. Quietly, they vote a $12,000 special assessment to repave the private road. Surprise! Another hidden cost. And we haven't even talked about the time tax, the Saturdays at Home Depot, the unclogging, regrouting, mowing, gutter cleaning, the contractor who didn't show up, the second contractor who did show up and made everything worse. Renters just call a number. Owners become the number. Most people don't realize the true monthly cost runs higher. Fully loaded, homeownership often runs 40 to 60% higher than the mortgage payment owners brag about at parties. The sticker price is a lie of omission. Reason 4 is the mid-twist that almost nobody actually saw coming. Reason 4. Rent and invest the difference. This is the move that quietly changes everything and almost nobody does. Here's the setup. In most American metros today, monthly rent for a comparable home is meaningfully lower than owning. That's once you include taxes, insurance, maintenance, and interest. Sometimes the gap is just a few $100s cheaper. In hot markets, it can be $1,000 or $2,000 cheaper every single month. Every single month. Boomer rule says that gap is the price of freedom from your evil landlord. The smarter money move disagrees. The smarter money move treats that gap as fuel. You take the difference between owning and renting every month, then you automate it straight into a low-cost, diversified index fund. Every month, without thinking, without flinching, without checking. Here's why this is the mid-twist. Most people who rent do not invest the difference. They spend it instead. That's how the renting is throwing money away myth got teeth. For a lot of renters, honestly, it really is true. Not because renting is bad, but because the discipline isn't there. The owner is forced to save through mortgage. A mortgage is a clunky, expensive, illiquid savings vehicle. The renter must choose to save through clean automation. The behavioral edge belongs to whoever sets up the automatic transfer and never touches it again. That's real wealth. When you do that, the math gets brutal in your favor. You're now compounding a diversified slice of the economy instead of one wood-framed structure on one specific block, not a single roof, school district, or insurance carrier. If your job moves, you move. If rates spike, you don't care. Hurricane hits, you call your landlord. You've replaced a concentrated illiquid bet with a diversified liquid one, a forced savings plan now automated, and it costs you absolutely nothing to run. Reason 5 projects this forward 20 years, the compounding projection. Let's run two characters, owner Olivia and renter Ray, both 32 years old, earning the same exact salary, both saving the same percentage of income. Olivia buys a house for $600,000 on day one, 20% down, that's $120,000 out the door, gone in a single signature. Add closing costs, moving, the new couch that suddenly feels mandatory. Call it $140,000, all in. Ray rents a similar home in the same neighborhood. He drops that $140,000 into an index fund. Every month, he calculates the gap between Olivia's all-in housing cost and his rent and invests that delta too. Automatic transfer, set and forget. Year 1, Olivia feels like a total winner. She's proudly holding a deed. Ray's holding a brokerage statement. Nobody throws a party for a brokerage statement, and that's the trap. Year 5, Olivia's home has appreciated a bit, but her equity is still mostly phantom on paper, because her mortgage is front-loaded with all the interest. Meanwhile, Ray's portfolio is quietly compounding away in the background. Year 10, things start to shift. Olivia has paid for a brand new HVAC system out of pocket. She's dealt with a roof leak, eaten a tax reassessment, watched her insurance premium climb every renewal. Ray? He's just watched his portfolio chart go up and to the right with absolutely no effort. Somewhere around year 12, the crossover happens. Ray's net worth passes Olivia's. He doesn't notice because he's not checking. By year 20, in most realistic scenarios, the gap is 6 figures. Sometimes deep into 6 figures. Ray is liquid. He can move, change careers, take a sabbatical, help a parent, start a business. Olivia has a house, technically worth a lot, mostly tied up, hard to access without selling it first, and emotionally weighted with 2 decades of memories. She is not poor, just less free than Ray, on paper. Now stress test it. What about divorce? Selling a house in divorce is the most expensive financial event possible. Splitting a brokerage account takes an afternoon. What about inheritance? A diversified portfolio passes cleanly to heirs. A house passes with property taxes, deferred maintenance, and 3 siblings who can't agree on the listing price. What about a recession? Ray can pause contributions, ride it out, stay flexible through any market storm. Olivia still owes the bank every single month, recession or not. The renter's path is more robust under stress. So what do you actually do Monday morning? Here's the framework. The first tool is the 5% rule. Take the home's purchase price and multiply by 5%. That's a rough estimate of true annual ownership cost. It blends property tax, maintenance, and the opportunity cost of your down payment. Now divide that number by 12. That's your true monthly cost of owning. If it's meaningfully higher than rent on a comparable home, renting wins. If it's meaningfully lower, buying might actually pencil out. In 2026, the 5% rule screams rent. The second tool is automation. If you choose to rent, you must automate the difference into an index fund. The same day your rent payment goes out. Not next month, not when you feel like it. Same day. Pay the market before yourself. Then pay yourself before you pay anyone else. That single move changes everything. That single behavioral move turns the renting path from a tired meme into a genuine wealth strategy. The third tool is honesty about when buying still wins. Because here's the thing, sometimes it does. If you've found the city you genuinely want to live in for at least 10 solid years, if you have stable income, a real emergency fund, and you're buying within your means, not stretching. If the rule of 5% is close to break even in your specific local market right now, if you value the psychological floor of a fixed payment more than you value pure financial liquidity, then buying can be a perfectly fine decision. Not a magic wealth machine, just a fine decision. The mistake most people make is treating home ownership as automatic. It isn't, and it never really was. 3 honest questions before you sign anything. 1. Will I almost certainly stay here for 10 years? 2. Am I buying because the math actually works or because I feel behind all my friends? 3. Have I priced in maintenance, insurance, taxes, and the opportunity cost of my full down payment, not just the mortgage? If you can answer honestly and the numbers still work, then go for it. If you can't answer those honestly, the smarter move is to rent and invest the entire difference. Let compounding do the heavy lifting quietly in the background while you keep your options wide open. And please avoid the identity trap. A house is not a personality. A mortgage is not a milestone. The goal is not to look wealthy at brunch. The goal is real wealth, optionality, liquidity, freedom. Freedom to walk away from a bad job, a bad city, or a bad chapter without asking permission. The boomers had their script. 2026 writes a new one. One more thing before you go. If this flipped something in your head, you're going to want the next video. Here's the thing. The same hidden cost trap that hides inside your house also hides quietly inside your driveway right now. Next video, we break down the true cost of car ownership in 2026 for you. We tackle the lease versus buy myth and why average Americans are quietly bleeding thousands every year. If you want to keep making smarter money moves, subscribe